Chapter 19 of Anne of Green Gables. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Chapter 19 of Anne of Green Gables by Lucy Maud Montgomery. A Concert, a Catastrophe, and a Confession. Read by Robin on January 11th, 2009. "Marilla, can I go over to see Diana just for a minute?" asked Anne, running breathlessly down from the east gable one February evening. "I don't see what you want to be traipsing after about dark for," said Marilla shortly. "You and Diana walked home from school together, and then stood down there in the snow half an hour more, your tongues going the whole blessed time, clickety-clack, so I don't think you're very badly off to see her again." "But she wants to see me," pleaded Anne. "She has something very important to tell me." "How do you know she has?" "Because she just signaled me from her window. We've arranged a way to signal with our candles and cardboard. We set the candle on the window sill and make flashes by passing the cardboard back and forth. So many flashes mean a certain thing. It was my idea, Marilla." "I'll warrant you it was," said Marilla emphatically. "And the next thing you'll be setting fire to the curtains with your signaling nonsense." "Oh, we're very careful, Marilla, and it's so interesting. 2 flashes mean 'Are you there?' 3 mean 'Yes,' and 4 mean 'No.' 5 mean 'Come over as soon as possible, because I have something important to reveal.' Diana has just signaled 5 flashes, and I'm really suffering to know what it is." "Well, you needn't suffer any longer," said Marilla sarcastically. "You can go, but you're to be back here in just 10 minutes. Remember that." Anne did remember it, and was back in the stipulated time, although probably no mortal will ever know just what it cost her to confine the discussion of Anne's important communication with her within the limits of 10 minutes. But at least she had made good use of them. "Oh, Marilla, what do you think? You know tomorrow's Diana's birthday. Well, her mother told her she could ask me to go home with her from school and stay all night with her, and her cousins are coming over from Newbridge in a big pung sleigh to go to the debating club concert at the hall tomorrow night, and they're going to take Diana and me to the concert, if you'll let me go, that is. You will let me go, won't you, Marilla? Oh, I feel so excited." "You can calm down then, because you're not going. You're better at home in your own bed. As for that club concert, it's all nonsense, and little girls should not be allowed to go out to such places at all." "I'm sure the debating club is a most respectable affair," pleaded Anne. "I'm not saying it isn't, but you're not going to begin gaddling about to concerts and staying out all hours of the night. Pretty doings for children. I'm surprised at Mrs. Barry for letting Diana go." "But it's such a very special occasion," mourned Anne, on the verge of tears. "Diana has only one birthday in a year. It isn't as if birthdays were common things, Marilla. Prissy Andrews is going to recite 'Curfew Must Not Ring' tonight. That is such a good moral piece, Marilla. I'm sure it will do me lots of good to hear it. And the choir are going to sing 4 lovely pathetic songs that are pretty near as good as hymns. And oh, Marilla, the minister is going to take part. Yes, indeed he is. He's going to give an address. That will be just about the same thing as a sermon. Please, mayn't I go, Marilla?" "You heard what I said, Anne, didn't you? Take off your boots now and go to bed. It's past 8." "There's just one more thing, Marilla," said Anne, with an air of producing the last shot in her locker. "Mrs. Barry told Diana that we might sleep in the spare room bed. Think of the honor of your little Anne being put in the spare room bed." "It's an honor you'll have to get along without. Go to bed, Anne, and don't let me hear another word out of you." When Anne, with tears rolling down her cheeks, had gone sorrowfully upstairs, Matthew, who had been apparently sound asleep on the lounge during the whole dialogue, opened his eyes and said decidedly, "Well, now, Marilla, I think you ought to let Anne go." "I don't, then," retorted Marilla. "Who's bringing this child up, Matthew, you or me?" "Well, now, you," admitted Matthew. "Don't interfere, then." "Well, now, I ain't interferin'. It ain't interferin' to have your own opinion, and my opinion is that you ought to let Anne go." "You think I ought to let Anne go to the moon if she took the notion, I've no doubt," was Marilla's amiable rejoinder. "I might have let her spend the night with Diana if that was all, but I don't approve of this concert plan. She'd go there and catch cold, like as not, and have her head filled up with nonsense and excitement. It would unsettle her for a week. I understand that child's disposition and what's good for her better than you, Matthew." "I think you ought to let Anne go," repeated Matthew firmly. Argument was not a strong point, but holding fast to his opinion certainly was. Marilla gave a gasp of helplessness and took refuge in silence. The next morning, when Anne was washing the breakfast dishes in the pantry, Matthew paused on his way out to the barn to say to Marilla again, "I think you ought to let Anne go, Marilla." For a moment Marilla looked things not lawful to be uttered. Then she yielded to the inevitable and said tartly, "Very well, she can go, since nothing else will please you." Anne flew out of the pantry, dripping dishcloth in hand. "Oh, Marilla, Marilla, say those blessed words again." "I guess once is enough to say them. This is Matthew's doing, and I wash my hands of it. If you catch pneumonia sleeping in a strange bed or coming out of that hot hole in the middle of the night, don't blame me, blame Matthew. Anne Shirley, you're dripping greasy water all over the floor. I never saw such a careless child." "Oh, I know I'm a great trial to you, Marilla," said Anne repentantly. "I make so many mistakes; but then just think of all the mistakes I don't make, although I might. I'll get some sand and scrub up the spots before I go to school. Oh, Marilla, my heart was just set on going to that concert. I've never went to a concert in my life, and when other girls talk about them in school I feel so left out of it. You don't know just how I felt about it, but you see Matthew did. Matthew understands me, and it's so nice to be understood, Marilla." Anne was too excited to do herself justice as to lessons that morning in school. Gilbert Blythe spelled her down in class, and left her clear out of sight in mental arithmetic. Anne's consequent humiliation was less than it might have been, however, in view of the concert and the spare room bed. She and Diana talked so constantly about it all day that, with a stricter teacher than Mr. Phillips, dire disgrace must inevitably have been their portion. Anne felt that she could not have borne it if she had not been going to the concert, for nothing else was discussed that day in school. The Avonlea Debating Club, which met fortnightly all winter, had had several smaller free entertainments, but this was to be a great affair. Admission 10 cents, in aid of the library. The Avonlea young people had been practicing for weeks, and all of the scholars were especially interested in it by the reason of older brothers and sisters who were going to take part. Everybody in school over 9 years of age expected to go, except Carrie Sloane, whose father shared Marilla's opinion about small girls going out to night concerts. Carrie Sloane cried into her grammar all the afternoon, and felt that life was not worth living. For Anne, the real excitement began with the dismissal of school, and increased therefrom in crescendo until it reached a crash of positive ecstasy in the concert itself. They had a perfectly elegant tea, and then came the delicious occupation of dressing in Diana's little room upstairs. Diana did Anne's front hair in the new pompadour style, and Anne tied Diana's bows with the especial knack she possessed, and then they experimented with at least half a dozen different ways of arranging their back hair. At last they were ready, cheeks scarlet and eyes glowing with excitement. True, Anne could not help a little pang when she contrasted her plain black tam and shapeless tight-sleeved, homemade gray cloth coat with Diana's jaunty fur cap and a smart little jacket, but she remembered that in time that she had an imagination and could use it. Then Diana's cousins, the Murrays from Newbridge, came. They all crowded into the big pung sleigh among straw and fur robes. Anne reveled in the drive to the hall, slipping over the satin smooth roads with snow crisping under the runners. There was a magnificent sunset, and the snowy hill and deep blue water of the St. Lawrence Gulf seemed to rim in the splendor like a huge bowl of pearl and sapphire, brimmed with wine and fire. Tinkles of sleigh bells and distant laughter that seemed like the mirth of wood elves came from every quarter. "Oh, Diana," breathed Anne, squeezing Diana's mittened hand under the fur robe, "isn't it all like a beautiful dream? Do I really look the same as usual? I feel so different that it seems to me it must show in my looks." "You look awfully nice," said Diana, who, having just received a compliment from one of her cousins, felt that she ought to pass it on. "You've got the loveliest color." The program that night was a series of thrills for at least one listener in the audience, and as Anne assured Diana, every succeeding thrill was thriller than the last. When Prissy Andrew, attired in a new pink silk waist with a string of pearls about her smooth white throat and real carnations in her hair, rumor whispered that the master had sent all the way to town for them from her, climbed the slimy ladder, dark without one ray of light. Anne shivered in luxurious sympathy when the choir sang "Far above the gentle daisies." Anne gazed at the ceiling as if it were frescoed with angels. When Sam Sloane proceeded to explain and illustrate how Socrates set a hen, Anne laughed until people sitting near her laughed too, more with sympathy with her than with amusement at the selection that was rather threadbare in Avonlea. When Mr. Phillips gave Mark Antony's oration over the dead body of Caesar in the most heartstring tones, looked at Prissy Andrews at the end of every sentence, Anne felt that she could rise in mutiny on the spot, if but one Roman citizen led the way. Only one number on the program failed to interest her. When Gilbert Blythe recited Bingen on the Rhine, Anne picked up Rhoda Murray's library book and read it until he had finished, when she sat rigidly stiff and motionless while Diana clapped her hands until they tingled. It was 11 when they got home, sated with dissipation, but with the exceeding sweet pleasure of talking it all over still to come. Everybody seemed asleep, and the house was dark and silent. Anne and Diana tiptoed into the parlor, a long narrow room out of which the spare room opened.